Yeah, good afternoon. I think I'm supposed to open the session, and it's my pleasure to welcome you again to the Tuesday afternoon year-end coffee round. And this time we are going to hear something about the practical requirements to verify our year-end registries. And I think the opening session will be given by Marco. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, go ahead.
Should I share my screen?
Yes, please.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Yeah. So welcome everyone. We also hope that we have prepared some slides. Oh. Did you also get this? Is that a loud announcement that someone is joining?
Yes, I will change this right now.
Thank you. Yeah, so I was about to say, so we prepared some slides based on the questions that you kindly provided, at least some of you before this meeting. But we also would like to make this interactive and make sure that you can ask any question. I guess Janice or others will check questions on the chat, so feel free to add questions there. So I will start with a short introduction and also with a disclaimer. We have 1 hour for this session, and obviously that is not enough to explain everything and answer all the questions about FAIRification, and it's therefore also not a replacement for working with the stewards of the EJP and your own stewards, and also the training sessions that also Claudio will say a few things about. Yeah, so having said that, scope of the FAIR principles, what it is about and what it is not about. So data stewardship is about many things and data management. So it's about what is collected, it's about how data are collected, what methods are used, what measurement methods. FAIR is about the third element there, about how data are offered for reuse. That is the main purpose of FAIR, and the findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable for machines. The for machines part is also an essential element of the FAIR principles. As you probably know, we've worked on this sort of generalized workflow for FAIRification. You can find publications by Annika on this, Annika Jacobsen and others. And I'm not going to any details. You see these 2 parts: fairness of records in a registry and fairness of the container of the registry itself. And you will see these 2 elements also back in our attempts to answer your questions. In the summer school, for instance, we go through this workflow in 2 days. Usually halfway that session, what the participants of such a course then, if you're asked to reproduce it, you'll get something like this. So that you are a bit confused is quite normal. It's quite an elaborate process to go through. So having on the left here the starting point is basically when the world is not fair, if data are not findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. That means that it's difficult to answer queries across multiple sources efficiently. You should also know that when we did a collection of FAIR standards and tools for FAIRification, and we came up with a list of more than 80 standards and tools. So also for the developers of FAIRification, this is a challenge. And therefore, in the EJP, we do research and development of organizing support for stakeholders, including the steward project, the steward organization that we set up, and the training sessions. We work on guidance, as short-term, mid-term, long-term. A session like this is a bit short-term, right? And there's software development going on, for instance, the transformation of data to a more fair data, or to make software fair data generating software. And you will see some examples of that in this session for registries. Claudio, what can you say about the summer school?
Thank you, Marco. Hi all. Yes, I would like to say that the International Summer School Rare Disease Registries and Verification of Data is part of the training activities of the rural packages on data management and quality training of the EJPRD. And this course is made up of 5 days organized by ISS in close collaboration with EJPRD partners. This course is composed of 2 training modules. The general roadmap of this course foresee that participants in the first module will learn what resources are needed for the establishment, maintenance of high-quality registry, and the features of a successful strategies to ensure long-term sustainability of the registry, the quality, and legal and ethical issues in compliance with the European General Data Protection Regulation. While in the second module, the verification of data, participants split in general in 4 or 5 small groups and followed by IT trainers will deepen their knowledge on the single step of the verification of data and will discover the potential of FAIR registries. In this part, we allocated also a slot time to discuss FAIR data management and FAIR project planning. For each step of the verification process, there is a plenary session followed by an hands-on exercise and a wrap-up session. If the course, as last year, will be adapted in an online format due to the force majeure situation associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, in the second module, for each step of the verification process, there will be a plenary session followed by hands-on exercise and a wrap-up session. Another and last things that I would like to add regarding this course is that the registration is free of charge, and even if the course will be held as a face-to-face or adapted as online, to ensure an active participation and exchange with the teaching staff and participants, there is a maximum number of participants admitted to each training module. And with these slides, I would like to remember you the next edition. That will be September 27, October 1. We will see if this edition will be as face-to-face or adapted as online. This is the first step in order that all the colleagues could have a deep introduction to each step of the verification, no, Marco? And very quickly.
Yeah. No, thank you, Claudio.
So save the date.
Yeah.
Save the date for the registration. I think that will open on June, July.
Yeah. And I think you can see it as a practical tool for learning about verification. That's
Yes.
And one of the things, possibly a side effect of the online sessions is, although we're all quite heavily overworked, we are planning to look at if we can reuse some of that material that we made for online, if we can reuse that for having next to the real face-to-face version of the summer school, which is the best. It's an intensive 2 days, but if we can reuse some of that for having additional training available for the community.
Yes, the summer school is a first important step that introduced the participants to and colleagues of EARN to the verification process.
Yeah. So, and also Claudio here, if there are more questions about the training and the summer school, then please ask them later or put them in the chat, and then Claudio can answer them. Yeah, then I'll continue if my slides will go to the next. This is something you know, so something we've set up also as a tool, the verification steward. So I'm not going into deeply, but it's to help you bootstrap the verification for your own registry, your own data. So this is then the list of most urgent questions. And I've at the bottom, you see that I've made one gray, and maybe some more should be grayed out that I forgot. But so we won't deal with everything here, because there will be additional workshops and coffee sessions on some of the topics specifically, like the UPIT is one that will be covered in future workshops. So then it can go into that much more deeply than we can do here. Yeah, so I think, Neil, I will just continue with my first part and then hand over to others, right? Yeah. So the first question was about solutions for semantic and technical interoperability, practical requirements to implement the semantic model, and examples. So this is, I think, now the biggest part of the slide deck that we're presenting here. So I'll make an attempt. This is a slide just to show you why we are doing this. That is at the moment, so this is to enable efficient answering of questions. And there you see a little train going past FAIR registries, and all the registries have been disambiguated. So the question can be easily answered and all the data can stay in its location without the problem of legal problems with putting data into one place. So this is the ultimate goal. And in the middle, you see semantic models. And that is the sort of common understanding that we share between these FAIR resources. So we're not sharing the data, we're sharing our understanding of the data. So what is then a FAIR registry, a FAIR data resource? I try to visualize that here. At the bottom, at the top in the middle, you see a FAIR registry, and I've teased that apart in the bottom part. So on the left, you see then the original database in basically whatever form or in whatever format you have that database. That in principle can stay remain what it is. To the left of that, you see what we here called a database with the semantically modeled information or description of the registry. So that's just about the whole thing. And below that, the semantically modeled data, the data in terms of global ontologies. These ontologies you see on the left in this cloud, which means that it's a reference that anyone can use. So there's models for describing catalogs and whole resources, and there's a model for describing actual data elements. And I'm not going into details here, but we relate these different data elements to one another. So that's also an important aspect. This model can have elements in it that points to different databases. And that's how interoperability works, because the model connects things, not the data are in one place, but the model connects things. So in a FAIR registry, you have this semantically modeled data as part of your registry. You need to access that. So there needs to be some computational element that allows you to sort of query that information. And that is what a FAIR data point is. And we can explain that in a bit more detail. Rajaram can explain that in even much more detail than I can. And that is the programmatic access to this modeled metadata. And then to the right of that, you see where the query comes in. So that query comes in through this access point, and then it queries that information and eventually fetches the actual data to compile an answer and give that back to the thing that queried for it. Yeah, so that is what a FAIR registry is. It's original data with two additional elements. If you have, which I think many of you have, when you have a registry database, you often already have multiple interfaces or one or more interfaces. The user interface is an obvious one, but also programmatic interfaces. Basically, the same applies. Then you would also describe these interfaces with that semantic model. So you have semantically modeled description of the registry and it access APIs, the application programming interfaces. So in a way that doesn't change a lot, it just becomes part of the description of your data in machine readable terms. Yeah, A lot of what we're showing is this conversion process in the middle. So that's also what Yuri will tell later on the Molgenis database. This can be done by electronic data capture systems. So what you need for a do-it-yourself fair data source, metadata, and that's the description about your resource. So you need to define that. So for instance, the identifier for your organization, the APIs you have, consent that you can refer to. And yeah, we propose for the EJP to structure it with the data catalog vocabulary. That's an international, often used model for structuring such information. Then for the common data elements, there's annotating or converting your own data with that model so that it can be treated in terms of the shared common data element model. And then the third element was the API to access that metadata, which means deploying a fair data point. And by doing that, you're actually sort of deploying the DCAT model anyway, because it's all very much integrated. And then, yeah, you can also link other data access APIs to that metadata. Right, so it's a bit of a reiteration. Another way of doing it is by incorporating all of that in your electronic data capture system. And examples of that, of such software with fair capabilities, is Molgenis. You will see that in a couple of seconds. There's also the Castor system where we've done that in a sort of first example. That's the FASCA registry. And there's also that's actually, I think, the very first fair data point, and also an earlier version of the fair data point was done after a hackathon by the OCT. That is my hook to the Molgenis team.
Yes, thank you very much. Let's see if I can get control.
Oh yeah, should I give up control and stop presenting? Oh, I can allow this myself. Wow.
Ah, perfect. Thank you.
You can request control. Yeah.
Great. So, hello, my name is Yuri van der Velde. I'm going to highlight the Molgenis EDC. So the software has been under development for over 15 years in a group of Morris threads, and it's basically used for all kinds of life science applications. So at its core, it's a customizable data system where it's possible to change the underlying data structure, including user interfaces, permissions, etc. It's powered by the latest database engines for fast query performance, and it features things like batch import, exports, APIs for sharing data, and it's a completely open source product and developed on GitHub. And if you're interested, you can go to the website. I'm able to go to the next slide. Yes. So as I mentioned, I think someone stopped the presentation.
Yeah, that was me. I clicked on something.
That's not ideal.
Go back to the presentation. So apparently I still have some control myself as well. Are you still in control?
No, it's
you
not.
have to start the presentation, Marco.
Yeah, I am in presentation mode again.
We don't see it. Maybe you haven't shared it.
Oh, okay. I'm not sharing my screen anymore. That's it. Okay.
Yeah, we see the presentation.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, Molgenis is this customizable data structure, and because in practice, users often find out what they really want by using the database instead of designing it in theory. So this way of working allows you to sort of set up your database and then evolve your database instead of starting over each time again. And this is also why we support Excel files as a convenient way to add and update the data within your database. do I go to the next slide? Is it spacebar?
We should ask Marco. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe Marco should do it. So currently 4 ERNs are using Mulgenus as their central electronic data capture system. So these are Genturis, Ithaca, Cranio, and Skin. And of course, the fact that 4 ERNs are using it also allows the Mulgenus team to help think along with cross-ERN harmonization of data. And Mulgenus supports this the mentioned DCAT2 FAIR data point. So if you have a running Mulgenus database, it basically takes 2 steps to set this up. So first you have to upload a piece of FAIR data point data structure. And then you have to either upload or manually enter your FTP metadata. And at that point, Mulgenus will take care of the rest and basically become a FAIR data point. So that is built in. Thank you. And in the next version of Mulgenus, so it's possible to an extent now, but the next version will have powerful semantic mapping capabilities. So here we show an example of the JRC common data elements, where the concept of a patient and the elements belonging to a patient have semantic annotations in these red boxes. So then the question is, okay, this is very nice. It becomes, your database becomes already more semantic, so you express more clearly what you mean. But you can also do things with this. So if you have set up these annotations, then you can start to export the data within your database as RDF triples. And as you may know by now, RDF is sort of the cornerstone of making data technically interoperable. And here you see a few dummy patient records based on the common data elements that are now exported as RDF triples, specifically a turtle file. And this is possible because these annotations were added within the database. And as a final note, the things that I've shown you are not necessarily all unique to Mulgenus. Other EDCs can do these things as well. But I think you have to be aware that building all of these capabilities yourself is a lot of work. So please do consider using an existing EDC if you have not chosen one yet. So on that, I'd like to wrap up my part. Thank you.
Yeah. And maybe the other part I can add to the last comment you made. I very much agree. If you work, because there's obviously many reasons why you choose an EDC, but then we would argue that make at least one argument if they don't already do this, to make a requirement that they work with us to start building this in.
Yes.
In principle, in the EJP ERN project, that's sort of built in this process, but I think it's useful to keep repeating it. Yeah. So I think then the next is for you, right, Rajan?
Yeah, that's right, Marco. Can you go to the next slide? And then it's easier. Yeah, thank you, Marco. I will address like these questions like that were asked, like how much of programming need to be done on the registry side to implement FAIR data point. So if you just have an EDC that already has this feature, then you don't have much of a problem. But if you have an EDC like which doesn't have like a FAIR data point features, then what you can do is like you can just simply like reuse like the reference implementation of FAIR data point, which is developed by us and different projects here in Netherlands. Basically, like that system is like a well packaged. It's a standalone software application, open source, MIT license. It comes as a Docker image. So from your side, like what you have to do is like you simply like have to install that software in one of your server. And from EJP RD side, like what we do is like we're actually organizing hackathons. People like who they already have like their own EDC system, and if they want to implement like if they want to like deploy like a FAIR data point software along with it, we can actually like help people like installing the software during this hackathon. So what is the requirement from your side is basically like you need to provide a server where like you can host this software. I made a simple calculation like how much server space is needed to host like a FAIR data point reference implementation software. This is a specification, and this is what like costs us like monthly if you buy like a server space in InnerSnet server, which is hosted in like Europe, 19 euros per month approximately. Next slide, please, Marco. Yeah, what are the practical steps involved in implementing semantical model? So on the left-hand side, my left-hand side, you see like the requirements, and the right-hand side, like you see like possible solutions offered by EJP-RD. So first of all, like you need like a semantic model to actually like implement it in your database to describe it. In EJP-RD, we actually like providing this as artifacts, right? Like we have like a working groups, for example, like a CDE, common data element. We make like semantic model for common data element, and we make like a periodical releases, and we do maintenance for that model. And the second step is like you need to map your data structure to the common data semantic model data structure. For that, like you have to do some mapping exercises. So from EJP-RD side, like Mark Wilkinson is actually like developing a generic tool which takes like a CSV file and convert that into like a CDE semantic model. Right now, like it's focusing on like a CSV file, but we can also do it for like other standards too, like XML, JSON. If there is a standard representation, we can actually adapt that in this tool. The third thing is like once you have like a semantic model, then you have to host that data somewhere else, right? Like we usually use like a triple store to host like a semantic model databases. There are like many triple store solutions available, and some of them are free, and some of them are like commercialized, but you can get like a free version of it and later move to commercial version. For example, like GraphDB is really good. It has like a authentication layer on top of it, so you can just lock your data and provide to like only authorized person to use it. The last thing is like developer need to maintain like the data conversion pipeline, right? From the EJP-RD side, what we provide is like a basic training, like what Claudia mentioned, like in early slides. In summer school, like we offer you like basics of like semantic technology and tools to use, generating them, hosting them. That's it, Marco.
Okay, thank you. Later on.
Yeah.
So then there was a question that's sort of a different type of question. It was a question of what is needed from a hospital. So yeah, we're not going into that deeply, but we can also always discuss it. So this is sort of based on my observations, on our observations at our own hospital, the Leiden University Medical Center. So is it and some other discussions we had, maybe with some of you here. So I made a distinction between whether the hospital is sort of fair-minded or not. So that's a difference. So if it is, then basically you could argue that the general approach that we described here also applies to the hospital. You would look at what is the data management software, can we build it in there, can you install a fair data point, can you model the data with an ontological model. That basic approach also applies for the hospital then. What you typically see is that they made a choice in the hospital for a certain standard or set of standards that may or may not fit with what we are doing in the rare disease community or the EJP, and then you have a mapping need. So that is something that we actually would like to know. Maybe we can also make some suggestions to not start doing your own mappings, but use authoritative mappings or work together on good mappings. That doesn't mean that we can verify hospitals. That would be beyond the scope of what we can do from the EJP. What also part of this approach is that, well, like we are doing with the verification stewards, like you have this three-party investment: the software, data stewardship, local data stewardship, and fair data experts. And obviously, as Rajam also mentioned before, the hosting of some of these software on servers. If your hospital is not into FAIR at all, then there's not that much that you can do. Part of what I think is already sort of the default of what we see is somehow get the data into your registry and make that registry FAIR. That is the best what you can do. What we've observed is that often a copier, I call it a copier, is hired to manually copy the data from the hospital systems over to the registry. That is obviously not an ideal process. It's error prone, not so efficient. And yeah, as Morris is already smiling, it's technically mostly not necessary. So we would argue lobby for the hospital going fair and do something about this. Yeah, and it's also important observation, I think, from all of us doing this at hospitals is do not expect that the change process will go very fast. That's just expectation management. So it's going to a more fair approach is culture change. That's hardly ever a very fast process in big organizations. An example is, well, actually many academic hospitals in the Netherlands are sort of in various stages of transition. So we do provide, I think, interesting examples of steps towards becoming more fair as a hospital. Yeah. And one of the examples of that is that there was a call out to develop data stewardship competency centers in our hospitals, and many have done that now and are also collaborating to do this. So that is what I had for the question, what is needed from a hospital. I hope that answers that question, and otherwise you can ask more questions about it. Niru, I think now it is you.
This is just an announcement. I think most of you already know that there's going to be technical workshops a lot. I mean, in the regularly, just like these coffee sessions are happening. So we have quite a few of the specific details that were asked in the questions. We're going to have workshops on them, and we plan to start it in March. And right now it's planned one every week, but as depending on the speakers, we will the schedule might change a little bit, but the topics will not. So these topics will definitely be covered over the next half year, let's say.
Yeah, and maybe also good to point out that based on your questions, it's something also that Morris and I discussed up front. So it's actually nice if it might be that there are questions that we cannot answer promptly here, but then we'll take them as input for workshops and identifying new requirements, etc. So feel free to share whatever issue you have. If you cannot answer them now, then we'll see if we can address them at some other point in another event. Yeah, I think then we're down to our final slide of the prepared answers. So in conclusion, basic fairness in line with the EJPRD means metadata modeled by the EJP metadata model, which is based on this DCAT standard. Data modeled by the CDE semantic model, which is itself, again, is based on existing ontologies. We're not doing a full new reinvention here. And it then makes sense to start with the JRC recommended CDEs, because then all this applies. I should maybe add, it's not on the slide, if you want to go beyond that, talk to the stewards and we can see what we can do with what potential additional data elements, because obviously they can be modeled as well. Then stewards and the tools that are being developed in the EJP help in the process. You've seen in by the Mulgenis example, and there are more examples, that EDC software can have this conversion process built in and the APIs, etc. And that workshops are planned on many of the aspects that relate to FAIR.